Now, Ireland's lower VAT rate for tourism has become a significant dead weight on the economy, and increasing it now won't harm tourism. That's according to the Department of Finance as part of their preparations for the budget. The rate was cut from 13.5% to 9% in 2011 to help boost the industry and especially to keep people in work. Patricia King, General Secretary of the Irish Congress of Trade Unions, agrees. Tim Fenn, Chief Executive of the Hotels Federation, disagrees. They're both with us in our studio this morning. Thank you both for coming into us. Patricia King, first of all, you share the view of the Department of Finance. Why?
I do. This is a 500 million per annum subvention in the form of tax relief to the industry, to the hospitality sector in particular. And it came at a time when unemployment was at 15% and when actually in 2011 there was an economic crash. We have moved on considerably now. We have an employment level of 5%. We have economic growth, which the Department of Finance themselves say is quite robust and can be stood up. And what we also have is this was brought in to lower prices to consumers. It never happened actually. Prices in the sector are up. In hotels they're up about 17%. The prices in hotels have risen by over twice the rate of all other services in the state, and indeed the whole economic prices raised in the period about 3%, where you have seen this huge price level raise in hotels, and in fact they're 20% higher than the equivalent in the EU 28. So from that point of view, profits are up as well considerably, and indeed in turnover terms actually about 40% of the turnover here relates to about 600 of the companies. So you can see there a pattern whereby this is subventing and assisting some of the biggest, most profitable companies in the country, and it's no longer required.
Tim Fenn, Chief Executive of the Hotels Federation, your industry is thriving. In fact, you're positively rolling in it. You don't need a €500 million subvention, surely.
Okay, well, I suppose Irish tourism currently yields a 23% tax take to the Exchequer. That means for every euro that a visitor spends, 23 cents goes to the Exchequer. So this year we expect to bring in about 10 million visitors to Ireland, and that will generate about 9 billion to the economy, which means that we're going to be giving about 2 billion in taxes to the Exchequer.
Yes, you're not doing it out of the goodness of your heart. You are making a lot of money doing this.
Yeah, I think but the important point here is that this is all about tourism being an indigenous export industry, which provides jobs throughout the country.
Yes, but which the Department of Finance is arguing doesn't need the leg up it's been given for the last 7 years.
Well, what the Department of Finance is doing in its report, we believe, first of all, lacks balance. It spends most of its time looking at what the household spending patterns in Ireland. It doesn't take into account the fact that 80% of the revenue comes from overseas. International visitors decide to go based on various factors, including value for money. It's an extremely competitive international industry, and the facts that the revenue have looked at, which relate to the domestic economy, don't take that, we believe, sufficiently into account.
We're competing, Patricia King, with other countries for tourists.
Yeah, well,
we're already a fairly expensive country at the best of times, and now we would have a VAT rate which, if it was to go back to 13.5%, would be one of the highest VAT rates in the EU.
Well, factually, I would disagree with that. The UK has a VAT rate in this sector of 20%. The average VAT rate in the EU is 15.6%. It's 9% in Ireland. One or two other points I might make. The Department are very clear. This is a very regressive tax in that it's discretionary spending, as you know, from household income, and the more well off you are, the more you can afford to spend. So this is subventing people, the more well off, rather than those on lower income. The second point I would make to you is, from a wages point of view, 1/3 of the workers who work in the hospitality sector are on minimum wage or less. The report makes a very interesting point about the distribution of wages. 55% of the wage bill goes to the bottom 80% of the employees in it, and the rest, the 45% is distributed over the 20%. That tells you about the inequity even operating within the sector itself. The other thing to make the point is, let's look at, Tim has made the point about tourism. There have been very strong initiatives by bodies like Tourism Ireland, like Bord Fáilte and so on, and the department in their report point to the fact that they are major contributory factors to the increase in tourism numbers. I mean, it has increased in the period by 39% in terms of tourist numbers, and from about 4.3% billion in revenue income in 2011 is up now at 6.8 billion in revenue in 2017. So tourism figures are increasing, and they're increasing by virtue of being supported by a lot of initiatives, not just the hotel sector.
Isn't this a fair point, Tim Fenn? It's not like you're being punished if this VAT rate was to be re-increased to 13.5%. It's simply that the stabilisers that you were given at a time of difficulty are just being taken off. You don't need them anymore.
I think what we see from the change in the activity in the industry over the last number of years is that the 9% VAT rate has worked. It actually works. It's
done its job.
It hasn't, because there's a lot more to go. And we believe that if given the right circumstances, we can continue to grow the industry, which provides a balance for our over-reliance on inward investment. It also provides jobs in every county and town throughout the economy, which means it's a great provider of industry and rebalancing in the economy. So the regional imbalance is something that's a big problem for Ireland. Tourism is the only shop in town to deal with that. So when we talk about how this works, in Europe there are 16 countries that have a tourism VAT rate of less than 10%. And there are only 5 countries that are above 13.5%. And Patricia's correct. One of those includes the UK, which may not be in the EU this time next year, which has another implication for us, because the uncertainty around Brexit is
yes, but at 13.5% we would still have a much lower VAT rate than the UK.
Next year, we don't know what they're going to have when they leave the EU.
Patricia?
Well, I mean, the department itself in its report says the regional piece is overstated in terms of losses that might be incurred. It is always open to the government as well, where there are very small micro companies that may have some fallout from that. They can raise the turnover threshold to 40,000, and they can do that, which would assist those companies. But there is now absolutely no case at all to continue upholding this subvention to very profitable companies.
Patricia King, General Secretary of the Irish Congress of Trade Union, and Tim Fenn, Chief Executive of the Hotels Federation. Thank you both very much for coming into us this morning.